Hi there, you're on Gossip Says channel. Enjoy watching, subscribe and like it. It's growing our community. After a 5-year relationship, my girlfriend found a new guy and is having emotional swings in our current relationship. Until a couple of months ago, I was in a relationship for 5 years. During this time, I was made to feel like I couldn't say anything to my girlfriend, which might be seen as critical or in any way negative. When this did happen, the following arguments would become a screaming match almost immediately. She would never back down or admit any wrongdoing. Preferring to storm off and sulk, I would often try and reason with her and end up apologizing for my part in the argument, offering an olive branch hoping to be met in the middle. Eventually, the hostility would peter out and she would either try and break the ice by sending memes or offering to order food in what she saw as an olive branch. Then we would move on. We would never talk about what happened or what was said again. She wouldn't take accountability or apologize for anything she had done, just get less mad. It felt like I was expected to just be grateful for that. So over 5 years, I got to the point I just stopped being critical of her. If she did something wrong or was careless or thoughtless, which she often was, I got into a situation where I found it easier to just swallow it all down and leave it alone. A couple of years into the relationship, I tried to end things, and she got so upset she made herself sick. She curled up on the floor like a baby, kicking and howling in the fetal position until she hyperventilated. She then crawled to the bathroom and cried until she threw up. She made herself so unwell I ended up backing down. We also had an argument where she threatened to kill herself. She acted like she was walking out to throw herself into a river and had me following her around the town we lived in trying to keep her safe. She tried to create a scene for passersby like I was harassing her, but as soon as I backed off enough, she would act like she was going to jump into traffic or a river or in front of trains, but never getting close enough without letting me get to her and stop her. This night, I made sure she went home safe and informed one of her friends, and she texted me at 5 a.m. saying she was on a bridge and it was too late to stop her this time. I went out and was frantically checking every nearby river, bridge, etc., and eventually found her in her house tucked up in bed, having never left. Regardless of her mental state, it became hard to take her threats seriously again after that. Those were the absolute worst of times. However, for the most part, our relationship was two people who have some things in common: watching TV and getting fat together while playing on our phones. When we were in the status quo, it was absolutely fine. Nice sometimes, but a lot of withholding feelings, with occasional blowouts. I would cook and clean and she would sit on her phone. Whenever there were any expectations of her, she would pull an illness out of nowhere: an unsettled stomach, a migraine. She'd even feign sleeping. As soon as there was some wrongdoing or requirements for her to step up, there was a change of narrative, positioning herself as a victim and an excuse not to participate. I would spend my days off doing my things, but always make time for cleaning and organizing dinner for us both. Her days off would be spent staring at her phone or computer, then losing track of time and getting in the bath for a wash half an hour before I get home, often meaning I would get back and have to organize dinner while she sat in there for hours. Whenever there was an argument about our relationship, the second her crappy behavior came up, there was a switch to talking about something I had done wrong months prior and why was she even sticking with me. This put me on the back foot and moved all conversation away from what she had done. If I brought up something truly valid that needed talking about, she would tell me it didn't happen or pick holes in it enough to make it invalid. And if that didn't work, she would just move on to the next thing. And I'll admit, because of the behaviors above, I did feel stuck for the longest time. So I became resistant to doing things with her. I would avoid committing to holidays or moving in fully. I didn't include my parents in our lives because I was embarrassed by how I lived. She even started talking about buying a house together, which just had me sticking my head even further in the sand. You never knew where the next drama would come from, where I would have something else expensive that we couldn't entangle held against me. So I was resistant to a lot of things we did together, which I'm certain she noticed and I felt awful about. I was open to resolving things and talking, but if she wouldn't do that, I didn't want to fully submerge in the relationship. I didn't want to just go with the flow, which was entirely headed in her favor. A year into our relationship, I found out she had lied to me during our getting together, which has made me really sensitive to the way she says things and how she shares things. I'm only mentioning this because it's an important example of her and her attitude when it comes to the truth and what constitutes a lie in her eyes. I had always been suspicious of her hanging out with her ex when we started talking and eventually sleeping together, but she always denied it, saying we haven't been together in ages. I discovered that while she wasn't still with her ex when we got together, so technically telling the truth semantics. They weren't a couple for ages, but he was still very much in her life. He was still being strung along, and they had even slept together since we started talking. Just in the same way, the guy before him was still on the scene before they started dating, and so on and so forth. There was never not a guy in her life, and she only told him about our relationship when it was clear we were serious. It's stuff like this that makes me feel crazy. I called this at the time and she just shooed it away, and I felt awful for accusing her. I can be pretty naive, so I get on edge with this type of thing. Like I say, I just feel crazy all the time. I only tell this story because several years on, she has broken up with me. There's clearly someone else, but she won't admit it. This is what's wrecking my head just now. So cut to now. I know she was texting a guy from her past who had recently undergone a breakup in the months leading up to ours. She initially framed this as not letting life pass me by, as an old school friend of hers died during the pandemic while they were making plans to meet up. It hit her hard. She didn't want this to happen to her again. Started with casual texting. After a few weeks, it became sitting on the sofa with her not saying a single word to me while she shields her phone and taps away, grinning. This led to her sitting up on her phone all night when we went to bed. Then just not coming to bed until all hours, to actually going out for a drive at 2 a.m. one night and coming back at 5 a.m. with an unconvincing story about where she'd been. At this point, I need to remind you about all the above behaviors. It seems so obvious in writing, but each one of these events was explained away, and any concerns ended up in gaslighting. Anything beyond that resulted in escalating until the conversation was dropped. Then, after too many questions about her recent behavior, she said she needed space and kicked me out. This lasted 3 weeks, during which she never made any attempt to talk to me about anything. Trust me, I tried. She also slowly distanced herself from me and turned off location services on her phone, a feature she'd insisted on using to know where I was. Any contact with me was played as a hassle. Then eventually she broke up with me after I tried to get her to give me any information about where she was emotionally or what was going on. Through all these conversations, never a single explanation, no admittance, no ownership. Most of our heavy talks were me asking her questions and her staring into space. The current situation is, for someone whose phone is never out of their hands, getting a message from her on my terms is like getting blood from a stone. But if she hears about me going out for a beer with friends, she's suddenly there to offer me a lift home. She's been sweet and will still make plans with me like we were together. We had gig tickets which I said she could take someone else to, but rather than approach the subject, she just avoided the conversation until it was too late. We ended up going together, which was good fun, but I don't think her first choice. My birthday happened and she did make a bit of a fuss, which was nice. The card was full of relationship language. We went to a Halloween party together, which she didn't have to ask me to but did, and kept talking about how much she was looking forward to it. And although the organization of our costumes was a massive pain and reminded me what she was like at her worst, it was a good experience, something we had nearly never done as a couple before. Now in general, there is occasional contact, but there are nights when she just ignores me fully, won't even read my messages, and never apologizes for it. There have been nights when I have been so desperate and she knew my mental health is in tatters and she's just ignored my texts. These, I'm sure, are the nights she is with him. Some nights she's not attentive but will still chat. Some nights she's less than that and will talk about what she got up to, and it's always boring shit. But these nights, as I say about never lying, she won't tell me she was doing nothing watching TV. She'll just get defensive and start asking why I'm always asking what she's up to make me stop the conversation. It feels so obvious and it's just driving me around the bend. Especially when the night before and the night after you get a text at bedtime saying good night with a love you lots for X. I ask her about the guy and she just changes the subject. The only answer she ever gave me was months ago that they don't talk about anything interesting. I said she was lying about it and she got angry, because yes, reader, she hasn't told me anything about the topic, so she has not technically lied. I even said to her recently that if she keeps ignoring this topic, it feels like she wants me to just read between the lines, which she in turn ignored, and I still struggle to take the hint. It feels like if she forces me to act on her bad behavior, walk away, cut her out, then I'll be the bad guy and she has one less problem. She can use that to cover up any infidelity and focus the conversation on me walking away. And the final kicker is, as we have a lot of mutual friends at work, she has asked me not to talk about it with any of them as she doesn't want people gossiping about our business. This means 2 months on, she has all the cards, and I am still having to lie to people at work about how she is and what we are up to as a couple. In conclusion, there's an adult in me that knows he has no choice but to walk away and let her be. After the earlier days, I know that's what I technically wanted, but something is keeping me here with what's familiar. There's also the other side of me thinking it wasn't the worst relationship, but currently she is keeping me sweet and keeping the other guy a secret, as I'm sure she is with him from me. I just want to hear her admit it. I just want her to apologize or admit wrongdoing once in her life. And I just can't shake it. I also just need strangers on the internet to kick it into me and set me straight. I feel so pathetic being in this situation. I feel so needy of her and just completely worn down after 5 years of her worming her way in. But I also need to try and find a way to survive this breakup. I can't get over her because I don't get any space or time to. But I also can't keep having her keeping me close and essentially rubbing it into my face that there is something else going on. A 5-year relationship, kept alive by gaslighting, and DARVO was deconstructed by GF after she started talking to someone new. Now she holds all the cards and is playing cat and mouse with me, and I feel like I can't walk away as I have never been given the space to want that. But the only way it will happen is if I do it and be the bad guy, after having to spend the whole relationship being made to be the bad guy. Story 2: I am losing my dad to MAGA, and I'm really not sure what to do. My dad has always been a smart person, and I know that he loves me, but when it comes to politics, he lives in a Fox News echo chamber. His daily routine seems to consist of working, walking the dogs, eating, and then watching Tucker Carlson all night. This rejection of mainstream thought has been one of his defining personality traits for years. When I was young, he told me verbatim that some people think Bill Clinton is the Antichrist. I get it. You don't have to like the guy. But to go that far is a bit of a stretch. To make matters worse, he's always been pugnacious and has had a temper. He and my mother frequently argued when I was a kid. At one point, he even raised his hand to her. Eventually, she forgave him, and they got couples therapy. But around the mid-2010s, when Trump was running for president, he slid back into his old ways. Every time we came home, Fox News was blaring in the living room, and he would heckle Obama whenever he was giving a speech on TV. My mom started sleeping in a separate bedroom and eventually moved out and filed for a divorce. During that time, I now 34-year-old gay man decided I couldn't be around him anymore. I told him to get help, and we didn't speak for nearly 7 years. He made frequent attempts to make amends, telling me how sorry he was for messing up and wishing he could have been a kinder and gentler father. He told me that he had no issues with my sexuality and would love to meet my partner someday, should I ever have one. Eventually, I decided to give him another chance. We are communicating now, but it's usually through text, and I only see him a few times a year. He lives about 250 miles from me now in the same post-industrial Midwestern city he grew up in as a child. He hates it there, constantly complaining about the crime, taxes, unemployment, and lack of activity downtown. I'm trying to be sympathetic toward him as I feel that he represents the forgotten man that propelled Trump to a victory in 2016. But his refusal to listen to others and change his behaviors early on got him to where he is today, lonely, almost friendless, and depressed. To his credit, he has softened up, but he almost now seems emotionally distant. On a recent road trip with him, he went on this rant about how the Ukrainian war was manufactured by the Biden administration so that everyone would drive electric cars sooner. Rather than offer up any solution on how to combat climate change, he complains about the liberals wanting everyone to drive Teslas and put solar panels on our homes tomorrow. It doesn't matter my sister lives in Portland, or a city constantly being ravaged by heat waves and smoky skies due to wildfires. It also doesn't matter that Texas, a red state, is one of the leading wind power producers in America. To him, this is all the Biden administration forcing its agenda on us. My dad and have been able to find some common ground in a few areas. He supports gun control, arguing that most mass shootings could be prevented if we ban assault weapons. He also feels that American culture has become excessively consumeristic and wishes that an individual's value to society was defined by how much they make. He stated that if he still lived in Ohio, where we're from, he would have voted for Tim Ryan during the 2022 Senate race, calling him a good, honest man. He also recognizes that Trump has a temperament issue. Still, in the same breath, he contends that Trump was a great president. Now he's on the DeSantis 2024 bandwagon. At this point, I'm still trying to figure out what to do. I consider myself a liberal centrist and am trying to understand his views better. I try to skirt the issue of politics altogether, but he likes to bring it up, and no compassion or logic can enter his mind. I do stand my ground on certain issues, but he barely lets me complete a sentence without injecting his own opinion. I want to have a relationship with him as I do care about him and that side of my family. I could go on and on, but I realize at this point that I've ranted enough on here. Has anyone else been in this situation? And if so, can you offer me any advice? And please, I don't want to hear, just try to be there for him more, or he just needs a little more love. I tried my best to conform to his wishes for years, and it just drove me into a deep state of depression and a series of bad things I wish I could undo. TLDR. How do I learn to navigate my relationship with my distant, Trump-loving father?